The compliments arrived like small gifts throughout the afternoon, each one lighting up the screen with warmth. One person called the piece breathtaking. Another said it captured exactly how they felt on a rainy Tuesday. By early evening, the artist had scrolled through dozens of kind, specific words, and a quiet satisfaction settled in. But now, hours later and long past midnight, the glowing screen shows something the artist keeps returning to. And it is not the praise. It is a single short comment that mentioned the proportions in the corner looked slightly off. And somehow that one sentence is making all the rest feel invisible. The question that pushes sleep further away is not whether the criticism was correct or even fair. The real puzzle is why a single pointed remark can feel heavier than a pile of generous ones. If you have ever received a performance review filled with praise, but one critical phrase kept you awake, you recognize this pattern. On the surface, the answer can look simple. You want to improve, so you fixate on what needs work. That explanation contains truth, but it cannot fully explain the sting or the stubborn replay that outlasts deliberate effort. Psychologists who study emotion and memory have found a pattern so reliable it has been named the negativity bias. The negativity bias is the tendency for negative experiences, information, and emotions to have a stronger impact on our minds than equally intense positive ones. In other words, your brain does not weigh good and bad on the same scale. It puts a heavy thumb on the bad side. This bias shows up in many places: first impressions, relationship satisfaction, financial decisions, and over in how we remember. Research suggests that it often takes around 5 positive interactions to balance the emotional weight of a single negative one. In a landmark review of the evidence, psychologists concluded that bad is generally stronger than good across a striking range of human experience. That review did not rely on any single study. It gathered findings from hundreds of experiments covering attention, learning, memory, and social judgment. What emerged was a consistent picture. Negative events grab our attention faster, they are processed more deeply, and they resist being forgotten. Compliments, by contrast, often slip gently into the background, their details fading like morning mist. But understanding why this bias exists means looking beyond a label and into the machinery of memory itself. Think about what happens in the moments after you receive a piece of critical feedback. Your heart might beat slightly faster, your mind suddenly sharper, scanning the words for the exact point of threat. That burst of alertness is not random. It is the body's way of saying this information matters for your safety or standing. Emotionally charged events, especially negative ones, trigger a cascade that helps glue the experience into long-term memory. A structure deep in the brain called the amygdala becomes more active during strong emotional arousal, and it signals other memory centers to strengthen the storage. This is not a design flaw. It is an ancient survival function tuned to remember dangers and social signals that might lead to exclusion. In the environments where our ancestors lived, overlooking a social slight or a sign of disapproval could carry real costs for safety and belonging. Today, that same system processes a negative comment on a painting or a work report as if it were a potential threat to your group membership. The emotions are real, but the stakes have often changed, and your memory system has not fully caught up. There is another layer that makes criticisms especially sticky. It usually says something about you that you might not already believe. Most people hold a generally positive view of themselves, so kind words often confirm what they already think, while critical words introduce a discrepancy. The human brain is exquisitely sensitive to discrepancies between what it expects and what it encounters, and that mismatch grabs attention. Compliment often fits your self-image, so it passes quietly. A criticism contradicts your story, and your mind keeps replaying it to resolve the tension. That is why you argue with a single negative remark long after it was spoken, while the praise feels quietly true. It also helps explain a curious phenomenon. Sometimes people remember criticism longer when they secretly suspect it might be accurate. The uncertainty about whether the critic is right turns the comment into an unfinished puzzle that the mind cannot put down. Meanwhile, the compliments feel decided, complete, and therefore less urgent to revisit. Yet the weight of criticism does not land equally on everyone. People who are more sensitive to social rejection, what researchers call rejection sensitivity, can experience a single negative comment as especially devastating and memorable. For some, criticism activates a deep fear of losing connection, and that fear pours extra emotional fuel onto the memory fire. In environments where criticism is constant and harsh, people might become numb to it, but at a high cost to self-worth. There is a related pattern that adds to the imbalance. People tend to discount compliments more than they discount criticism. You might tell yourself that the person was just being kind, that they say that to everyone, or that they did not really mean it. But when someone offers criticism, the mind is less likely to brush it aside. It treats the negative words as more honest and revealing. Psychologists call this phenomenon the asymmetry in perceived honesty. Negative feedback is often seen as more sincere than positive feedback. Even children can show this bias. A child might dismiss a parent's praise as obligatory, while taking a peer's teasing as brutally honest. This double movement, magnifying criticism and minimizing praise, creates a powerful funnel through which only the negative seems to pour into memory with full force. The mind cycled through several steps. The comment triggered alertness, contradicted a self-view, and seemed more honest simply because it was critical. Now, it repeats endlessly. That loop can change behavior. The next time the artist picks up a brush, a small hesitation may appear where confidence once lived. Creative work, professional performance, and personal relationships can all be shaped by this remembered sting far more than by remembered praise. Leaders who give feedback often witness this. A team member can recount the single critical remark from a review months later, while the extensive positive framing has vanished. This mismatch can lead people to overcorrect, to avoid risks, or to stop sharing things that matter to them. At this point, you might be tempted to treat the negativity bias as a flaw to overcome by ignoring criticism entirely. But that would be throwing away a tool that has kept human beings alive for thousands of generations. The ability to learn from negative outcomes is essential for improvement. The problem is not that we remember criticism, but that we often remember it out of proportion. The true challenge is not to erase the critical voice, but to hear it at its actual volume while restoring the volume on praise. Think of the memory system less as a file cabinet and more as a security system that tags events with emotional importance. Negative tags scream for attention because they signal potential harm. Positive tags are quieter because they rarely demand immediate survival action. In the ancient social world, being remembered as a poor contributor could mean less sharing of resources. Being remembered as pleasant was nice but not as urgent. So the brain evolved to weigh negative social feedback more heavily, and that ancient calibration still runs beneath our modern scrolling and performance reviews. When you replay a critical comment at 2 a.m., you are not broken. You are experiencing a mind built for a world where social evaluation could be a matter of safety. The mismatch is that today's criticism rarely threatens your survival, but the alarm system cannot always tell the difference. That realization does not eliminate the sting, but it can change the story you tell yourself about why the sting is there. Instead of thinking, "I am overly sensitive," you can notice, "My threat detection system has been activated, doing its ancient job." From that small shift in perspective, other possibilities open. Now return to that late-night hour, the artist staring at the screen. The critical sentence still glows in the dark, and the compliments have fallen silent. The brain is not broken. It is doing exactly what brains have done for millennia, holding onto a negative social signal as if it were a warning light. The insight that changes everything. The loudness of criticism in your memory is a measure of your brain's ancient priority system, not a measure of its truth. That priority system gave more memory space to threats and social missteps because that strategy increased survival, not because it offered a balanced view of you. So the dramatic answer to why we remember criticism more than compliments is not that we are fragile or pessimistic. It is that our memory evolved as a survival guide, not as a scrapbook of warm moments. A guide that overemphasizes negative social feedback keeps you vigilant. A guide that only recorded praise would leave you unprepared for real danger. That ancient wisdom becomes a burden when it treats a critical comment in a safe modern room with the same urgency as serious social danger. Cost is real. Sleepless nights, creative paralysis, and a distorted memory of who you really are and what others actually think. The reversal is that the very same mechanism that makes you doubt yourself is also the mechanism that helped your ancestors stay connected and alive. This does not make the pain go away, but it removes the added layer of shame that comes from believing something is fundamentally wrong with you for feeling this way. You are not too sensitive. You are the owner of a high-fidelity threat detection system that is still adjusting to a new landscape. Recognizing this is the beginning of a more balanced relationship with criticism and praise. With that recognition, the question changes from, how do I stop caring? To how can I listen to criticism without letting it drown out everything else? The first step is not to fight the memory. It is to accept that the comment will keep returning for a while, and that is okay. The second step is to deliberately bring the compliments back into view, not to delete the critical one, but to place it among many others. Research on gratitude and savoring shows that intentionally recalling positive experiences can, over time, strengthen their emotional imprint. This is not magical thinking. It is a gentle practice of reminding your brain that the positive signals are also real and worth storing. Some people find it helpful to keep a folder or a note of kind words they receive, so the evidence does not evaporate when the next critical remark arrives. Others practice a mental habit. When the critical comment replays, they follow it with 2 or 3 specific compliments they genuinely received. This does not silence the alarm. It adds more data points, so the alarm is not the only sound in the room. The next morning, the artist wakes up, and the comment is still there, but the sunlight has changed the room. The painting sits on the easel, and the proportions might actually be slightly off, or they might not. That is a separate question about craft. What is different is that the artist now remembers that dozens of people saw something that moved them, and that memory no longer feels entirely buried. The criticism can become a tool for improvement, not a verdict on worth. And the night of replaying it was not a sign of weakness, but of a mind doing its ancient work in a world it was never designed for. The next time you lie awake replaying a single negative remark, you can remind yourself, this is an old alarm system, not a balanced report. You might still feel the sting, but a small shift may appear, from shame to recognition, from isolation to connection with everyone who has ever lain awake like this. And in that recognition, the criticism's power to rewrite your story begins to loosen, while quiet gifts of connection slowly return to memory.